All right, Karen's picking up the last of the write-ups on the FOS, and then we're going to split you into the 3 groups. While you're doing that, we're going to be up here kind of collating what everybody has said to us about what they've done with the FOS so that we can come back and kind of give you an idea of where we're at with most people. And we'll still have some discussion after that, but we thought that might give us a better idea of how far apart we are from some kind of consensus here, okay? So we were going to split us up into 3 separate groups, right? The technical writing, the creative writing, and the literature track. Is that right?
Well, we talked about doing 2 groups,
Okay, just writing studies and lit? Okay, all right. So maybe the best way to do this is to have people split into the groups. And then if we look like one group is going to be overloaded, kind of flip it back. And we're going to talk about maybe giving us only about 20 to 25 minutes for a kind of a discussion there so we can come back to the regular group. So if we want to put maybe the writing over here and the lit over on this group and then just kind of split right now. And if it looks like groups are getting too big, if you know you have a specialty in both, swap over to whichever group it looks like it doesn't have enough people, okay? That might be the easiest way to do it.
Could y'all use your microphones?
I was wondering if we could perhaps, when we first start to talk in the groups, that we not just jump into advocating for a course, but more to look at what problems it would cause for a 4-year school and a CC, discuss those issues first, and then go into, the value of the course.
And separate into groups so that we can get started. Would that be all right? Again, writing over there, lit over here, okay?
All right, everyone, thank you. If you could join us back here. Okay, so I hope that you had a chance to bring up some important points, even if you didn't quite reach a consensus in your groups yet. What we want to do is we want to take what you all produced either potentially before the meeting or last night, and we want to show where some consensus may actually exist that we may not have been as aware of yesterday. And then what we can do is once we see where people are kind of at, we can take what you all did in your groups and filter that through what we have up here on the screen. Okay, so we have two different sections here. One is actual courses, okay, at the top, and then at the bottom, if we could probably start at the bottom, this is the votes for the number of hours to include in the field of study, 9, 12, 15, or 18. You'll see we had 18 total people that actually gave us something, and half of them think that 12 hours is an appropriate size. The next largest is at 9. 3 at 15 and 1 at 18. So this is kind of an idea that we may want to kind of aim at 12, just since a lot of people like that. And then if we go up, okay, we have here the actual classes. These are all ACGM classes that are listed out, and you have kind of an abbreviated name for that course right next to it. And the number there that's kind of just running down the side, that's the number of people that included it in their potential field of study. 18 people gave us sheets. You'll notice 17 said 1302 was a good idea, 12 for 1301. Okay, the ones that are highlighted, those are the paired lit surveys, and I have the little note there, early Brit, late Brit, early American, late American, et cetera. 11 people liked the idea of kind of doing an or pairing of those two together, okay, where you do, okay, take early and late Brit, or take early and late American, or take early or late world. And so there was 11 of those.
Another 6 for just the one semester.
Yeah, and another 6 who liked the idea of just doing the one semester survey of all British, all American, all world. And you see that where it says one semester, one sim is that one. And we had 6 for who supported those courses. We did have a couple of writing track specific, and they liked the idea, for instance, of having the creative writing and tech writing being part of that if we did the 2 separate tracks, doing that instead. So, and some of them also still added like a survey to that. So these are some numbers. We can actually see.
Want to show the extra classes down?
In the bottom, just to the bottom, a few people did have some ideas for other core courses. We had one on speech. 4 people thought we should do anywhere from 6 to 12 hours of foreign language. Philosophy, we had 1, and there were 3 people who thought it might be a good idea to add an Intro to Lit or Research Methods course to the ACGM potentially. So this is what we had outside sort of ENGL.
So I think that as we're talking, and I may be wrong here, but it looks like that there's always going to be some disagreement about where we're at, right? But I think that we can see that we're starting to fall into some particular areas overall. And so I guess we want to see where we want to go from here. We can go ahead and say, let's concentrate on this idea of going with 12 hours, since that seems to be where most people are sitting. Can we think about doing something with, it looks like the 1301 and 1302 are something that we can maybe put forward as a motion, that we go ahead and put those in, and then the idea that we then talk about those surveys seems to be the next place. Are we okay moving forward, kind of looking at those things, and maybe even moving on to a motion, a little bit of discussion with that, and seeing if we can come forward with at least a chunk of those?
A question about what you were showing us there. I don't know if it's working. So if you scroll back up, if I understand this, so only one person said Mexican American literature.
Yes. On their field of study, potential field of study, yeah.
Question, if we went with, say, 12 FOS instead of 18, then that leaves 6 hours free for the student, because the student, they would still get an associate's degree once they completed, but it's just open to what they could take.
Yeah, at that point, those become open at the community colleges of what they want to direct students into. Those most universities will still transfer forward 60 hours. They'll decide how to do that. May not go directly into that degree, though. It's not guaranteed to go towards the English degree.
And I think we had said yesterday, we might, if we wanted to put those 6 hours in, it might be like the foreign language. Since most of you have a Bachelor's of Arts requirement that requires foreign language, you could probably put in like maybe the 6 hours there, and that wouldn't touch your upper level courses, but it would still help the students get what they needed for their Bachelor's of Arts.
And another question we had, just to clarify, we can't, a lot of people were looking at creative writing or technical writing, but we really can't have an or because those are two different. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was one of those that did a writing track in addition to a potential literature track. I kind of thought you could do a writing studies one, and you could actually have an or where you potentially paired like 2307, 2308 on the creative writing side, and then maybe 2311 in statistics or something on the tech writing side. And those were just 9-hour tracks. Oh, has it? Was it gotten rid of? So. So, well, and it might be one of those things where for 2307, an idea like another language, philosophy, and culture, something to write about, or creative arts class. I don't know. Yes, Shane, and then Joe.
I want to ask Alan, you might know more about this. So, and we don't know about this also. So we're talking about adding stuff possibly to the ACGM, but something happened with forms of literature where it was just removed from the ACGM, and we don't. So are we don't actually. Nobody actually has control of that. It was just told to us. So then are we going to be able to tell back, hey, we want to add this? Do we have that sort of power here?
You could ask to have it put back in the ACGM.
Okay.
Possible. There'd have to be some consensus.
Is that where it came from? That the universities didn't want it anymore? Is that one we were told?
When a course is removed from the ACGM, just drop out for no.
Okay.
If it's removed from the ACGM, that course to remain viable.
Got it.
Receive state funding. But technically, the answer is yes.
Doesn't this
Special needs courses?
Guys, since if you don't mind, since the forms class is something that I think is important to a group, but has nothing to do with what anybody suggested for the FOS, can we maybe have that after we kind of finish with the FOS, and then we can have some discussion, and maybe even Alan could bring in someone who can answer about what happened to that course and how we would, at that level, if we wanted to be able to put that in, what we would do?
That wasn't actually what I was arguing for. I was asking, since that one was removed, how are things removed and how were things added? That was all. I wasn't fighting for a forms of lit at all.
Okay, so then Joe, Kimberly, and Jason.
I just wanted to speak to the question of 2307 and 2311. If we think about those as genres of writing, which is how I think about them as a writing teacher, they in fact are comparable, right? Because when we're teaching writing, we're not teaching content, right?
I have a question, just kind of back to the forms of literature, just for a second, because in the ACGM, 2341 is still listed, but it looks like 2342 and 2343, forms of lit 1 and 2 are the ones that say that funding is being cut. So is there still a forms of literature that will remain in the ACGM? Okay.
But it's like
Just checking.
all the way affected 2019.
So Kim, if that's all right, can we come back to that, and we'll get that information and make sure that we get that to all of you, okay? Alan can see if somebody can pull up all that and kind of get some answers to that for us later. Would that work, since it's really, I don't think, affecting the FOS that we're working on, but that is something that obviously there's some major questions on, and we'll have him come back. Can we do that, Alan, that you can come back with that information? All right, thanks. Okay, so from here, can we do some...
Thank you. No, I just wanted to add, and we kind of had this discussion on the literature side, and I'm assuming the writing side was talking about these things. The broader question, a philosophical question, to me, I went home after last night, after our fun and difficult discussion yesterday, and I think part of the problem I was resolved was, in my own head, was that this mandate from the state to have an FOS on humanities is part of the problem. For the sciences, there's a clear set of content classes that seems to be shared along a preponderance of schools where you have biology 1, 2, and so on that are required. But for English, University of Houston and a lot of other four-year universities, and I think nationally this goes the same, they view it more as a liberal arts model where you're focusing on writing, critical thinking, exposure to various disciplines, which can include some English courses, of course, but there's more flexibility there. And what the state's asking us to do is to map on a more specialized group of content classes onto the lower division. And I think that's part of our problem is the logistics, where a lot of the four-year colleges have the content classes at the upper division. And so this becomes a kind of asymmetrical task that we're trying to kind of thread the needle in some ways, so I can kind of have all these cliches. So that's one of the issues I see with the surveys being offered here. I know that the community colleges teach them, I'm sure they're vibrant classes and they're imposed on community colleges by the ACGM, but I wonder if including them as transferable for the four-year colleges, what kind of problems those are going to cause. And I wonder about this, again, politically and ideologically, if the field of English is moving away from national literatures, which it is, look at the MLA, look at publications, PMLA, all the way down, if we're going to replicate demanding these national literatures at community colleges and then at four-year colleges, what that means for Texas in terms of our curriculum and our research. I don't necessarily, I'm not on board with that. So I just wanted to air those bigger issues. Thank you.
Jen, go ahead.
So the dominant discussion yesterday was how this FOS could transfer into the very idiosyncratic and wonderful four-year programs that you have. Very, very, different from each other. But that's not the charge of the committee. Our committee is to design what all students need in those first 2 years. And if you demand that we don't teach any 2,000 level courses or very, very minimal, you are making students take 3 years at the university, and that's very expensive. I know for the San Antonio constituency, I think people wouldn't go for an English degree. It's killing the field. It's also cutting the knees out from the mission of the community college. The understanding between communities and community college institutions is that students can come for 2 years or close to it, and that those years will prepare them well for transferring another 2 years. Even if they take the core, right, 42 hours and a little bit more, that's perhaps 2 years, right, at a community college, and then they've got to come for 3 years. English then becomes, what, a 5-year degree? That doesn't make sense. It doesn't serve our students. And as a colleague mentioned, in our smaller group, I know that we have to keep the interests of our institutions, in our eyes, but we need to think about the students.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
I would just say that for University of Houston specifically, there's 33 credit hours at the upper division in English that are required. So what we're talking about is trying to agree on a field of study plan that would allow as many lower division classes as can be to be transferred in. So I don't think it automatically leads to a 3-year English degree or anything like that, especially if we're going to bring in foreign language, which is at the University of Houston 6 to 20 hours. There's a lot of university BA requirements that we could agree on, I think. So that's the point. It's not to say, no, none of these would count, but it's to find a middle ground. And that's all.
Okay, Kevin and then Joe.
Right. I mean, I agree with your point about, the students are taking these courses, they need to have some place to put them. It's just that they're, when we say we're trying to prepare students so that you can enter into the four-year college or the four-year university, but the way that a lot of us are set up doesn't seem to be the way that this is guiding us to prepare the students at the two-year colleges. And I notice on the Tennessee plan that they have foreign languages as counting as, 12, or, if we had 2 of those on the list, 2 survey courses, 2 composition courses, would that be satisfactory? It gets to that 18 hours. That seems to be kind of the gold and the magic number for a lot of these plans. So I'm just trying to think of what would be least disruptive for every one of us involved in the process.
Joe and then April.
Well, I think it's already been said, but I think it deserves to be said again, that here we need to have our focus on what the students need. Let's face it, when we're done with this, a lot of us are going to go back to our campus and we're going to hear a lot of complaints. Oh, we've got to do this. Oh, we've got to do that. Why did you decide we should do this? I'm going to remind them I only had 1 vote. We're going to have to adjust, right? I don't think that we should be asking our students to make those adjustments. I think our institutions should be making those adjustments.
I think the question of what would be least disruptive for all involved is really poignant, because to piggyback on what Jen had mentioned, taking the surveys out of the community college would be incredibly disruptive for all community college students. Dual credit students, who are a big portion of our community college students, as Anna has mentioned in the past, take those surveys as part of their high school curriculum. So if we were to say, no, let's do foreign languages, that would actually, I think, be incredibly disruptive for, I can't say 100%, but I'll go ahead and say 90% of students at community colleges, particularly the dual enrollment or dual credit students. So I'm just putting that out there.
This isn't really anything in terms of that looks like a concrete suggestion, but I guess just to kind of second Jason's concerns, I think that we're absolutely right. We don't want to see a system where there's so much lack of parity between what students are doing at a community college and what four-year institutions are expecting, that that transfer students do 5 or 6 years to have to spend 5 or 6 years to get a degree and incur that cost and take that time. But I think that it's also really difficult to face thinking about an FOS that essentially is going to define a substantial portion of the courses that students do in the transfer students do in the major that in no way aligns with the values of our faculty. And this would have that effect. And so I think the hard thing in all of these discussions, I guess, I've realized is the kind of the lack of clarity about who makes decisions and who has agency. So there was a question about what happened to forms of literature. And so there are all of these things that just sort of happen. It's not clear to us to what extent we can modify the ACGM, so we sort of accept these things that just exist. Like, here's the ACGM, we have to then impose it here. And I think we're having a hard time figuring out what are exactly what is the horizon of possibility for us? What are the parameters in which we're working? Who made these decisions? Who gets to say? So anyway,
we did finish looking at the ACGM, and you're correct, Kimberly, in that the 2341 is not being removed, but the 42 and the 43 are marked for removal. Jen and then Elizabeth.
The elephant in the room is how the universities value the FOS, right? What level of rigor there is, how it's taught, how it's assessed. That's the next discussion we all need to have locally between the universities and the community colleges. If there's a discrepancy in the value, that's where that needs to be negotiated, right? universities need to work with faculty at community colleges, vice versa. You need to talk about curriculum, talk about instruction, talk about assessment.
The minute we put this FOS in place, that discussion is over. It becomes hard to have that discussion because now there's an FOS. I mean, now the sort of problem solved, right? There's the link. It would be imposed by the FOS.
What I was going to say was that from the smaller conversation that we had at the table, what is becoming very clear to me is that on the one hand, we've had all of these courses on that course list, and they have been used to transfer in, and I think some of us possibly don't know how our universities are transferring in these courses because they're there. Right? Mexican-American literature is there, and it is coming in some way. So we're speaking here in a theoretical vacuum in a certain kind of way. And I can only say that is because I heard from my major advisor this morning. So now I know how all this stuff transfers in to my institution, which I didn't know yesterday. And the other thing I want to say is that one of the things that the four-year colleges do after having that conversation that's clear to me is that they have very idiosyncratic ways in which various courses count for the core, and I don't mean, I'm definitely talking about the Texas core, not any FOS, how they count for the core and don't count for the core. And that is what's making this so absolutely difficult, is that I think Jason and I are at completely opposite institutions where everything in here, like I am all aboard the 12 hours that we've come up with so far, the 2 composition courses and the 6 hours of survey, because they will all transfer into UT like quite smoothly. But it sounds like, no, the way you guys do the core, it's actually completely inverted. And that seems to me like a problem we can't really solve today with the FOS other than to roadblock it. Like, no, there's no other solution.
Okay, April, Sally, and then Howard.
Can I say something just real quick? One of the things that we do need to remember is that there will be a time for comment. I think this is coming back to what you were saying, Charles, is how are decisions being made at some point? Even when we put an FOS out there, it's not in stone. It gets comments, and then those comments are taken into consideration. And there will be some universities that will really lobby against some of the decisions. And at that point, then, the coordinating board will make some decisions off of that. But it does go out for public comment.
Okay, yeah, April, Sally, Howard. And I do just want to add what we're talking about, just backing off of what Jen's saying. Joe, this is about the students. And remember, community college students are not university students. When they take these courses, it prepares them for the university. So many of our students come in underprepared, having to take developmental courses. And when we do our field of study, to some degree, we're trying to also help direct them through a path that will make sure that they're prepared with the skills, just like we were saying yesterday. 1302 teaches them the research essay so that they can come to your classes and take your upper division courses successfully. Because if they go through without 1302 because they chose some other communications course they thought was just easier, then they come in unprepared to take your upper division classes. And we do want to avoid that. Okay.
Can I just add one? Yeah. There's a difference between preparing, because if we were just sitting here and saying what courses, if we were talking about community college curriculum, yeah. And and let's be dynamic and say what do we envision English to be, that'd be one conversation. But what we're saying is, what is in FOS, what classes count transfer in as a block for university classes? And that's the rub, right? Is if these surveys count for university courses, but they're at the upper division level, not the lower division, that's the problem.
Okay, so April, Sally, Howard, Shane, Charles. Sorry, everyone wants to talk.
I think that that conversation, as Jen said, and you know, I know I'm kind of disagreeing with Charles here, but I think that conversation is the one that the FOS will bring about during the discussion period and then after. I think that this can be seen as a really productive moment to see how we align or don't, and how we need to both change, right? And maybe how we need to stop seeing one organization or one institutional body as in service to another, and how we both serve one another, right? Like collaboration, not what does the CC have to do so that the 4 years can be okay, but how do we all come together to create a seamless transition for our majors who choose community colleges because they're affordable, because they're local, and because they're their option, right? Like, because there's a lot of really strong students who choose community colleges and then transfer on. And I understand the importance of having discipline-specific and university-specific aspects to the major and making sure the students learn what it means to be a University of Houston or University of Texas Arlington English major, right? Because I took those classes and they were specific to the institution that I was at. But those might be 3,000 level courses now.
That we began our discussion by assuming that the courses in the ACGM are the courses that were already the courses that prepare students for upper division work at the four-year institutions. And I think what we've been hearing today is that the people at the four-year institutions don't see those courses as the courses that best prepare students for the kind of work they encounter at the four-year institution. At the same time, it's hard to get a sense of what kind of courses the people at the two-year institutions feel they could offer that would best prepare students for the four-year institutions, because they're already circumscribed by the ACGM, right? And that's what I meant by having a hard time figuring out. There are all of these ways in which this discussion is circumscribed that keep us from having a discussion about what courses could the faculty at two-year colleges offer that best prepare students for work at four-year institutions, and how can we, so there's a way where we just sort of accept, here's the ACGM, how are we going to make that fit?
If I can jump in here a minute, please. We don't write the ACGM. Y'all write the ACGM. The ACGM courses have evolved over time. Periodically teams are brought together from community colleges and universities to look at the course descriptions, the learning outcomes, and all that kind of stuff. So it's not some kind of mysterious volume that Alan created before he convened this meeting. And so it's we are, I'm trying to figure out what word to use, administrators, I guess, meaning that we facilitate the conversations and do the organizational work. The same thing is true for the technical course inventory used by the community colleges, WECM. And then one other comment, just for clarity, switching topics here, but about the public comment period, depending on the comments, it will come back to y'all. Probably via email, unless we get 1 million of them, and then y'all will have a conversation about if they're substantive or non-substantive. If somebody said, "Hey, it's missing a comma," we're probably not going to invite everybody to come back to Austin and agree to insert a comma. But if it's substantive and you need to come back and do more work, then we'll encourage you to do that. But if you think, okay, it's kind of the same conversation where we were, then it will move forward and ultimately be approved by our board at some time in the future.
I also think that, Charles, I understand that real need that we probably do at some point have to have a philosophical discussion about exactly what we're thinking is the direction of our discipline and how those changes might be taken into account for these things. Right now, we have a whole lot of institutions, both at the 2-year and 4-year, that are built around, in one way or another, these types of classes still. And if we put together an FOS that is all rebuilt classes in the ACGM, we actually have every single solitary institution that will have to go back and do new curriculum, and across the entire state. So there are some practical constraints, I think, that we need to think about. When someone said, I can't remember which person said that, well, we need to kind of do somewhat least disruptive in some ways. Yeah, we need to think about the students, and we need to think about where our discipline is going, with also an idea that there are some constraints because of how it could disrupt students across the state and institutions, if that makes sense. And I don't think that's what you were implying, but I just want to say that there is a constraint.
Okay, okay, Sally, Howard, and then Anna. Sorry.
So of the 4-year.
And this goes back to what we're talking about, some of, we're talking about not having English majors, and we're talking about these surveys. And the group, the largest growing group for us, and the way that we have made these surveys, are students who are never going to be community college students because they're the dual enrollments. And we have to think about this as the growing population who will be, ultimately, that's where our English majors are going to come from in all these large institutions. And they are the ones who are coming in to take these survey courses. So, because they're thinking that they're going to go. And so basically, if we get rid of those, that is then going to heavily affect the courses we can offer, and our dual enrollment students. It's going to affect our enrollment because they can't take those courses with us because they're not going to go to the four-year schools, which is what they've all been doing at this point. Like I said, our only Brit Lit that made this entire year was all dual enrollment because they were, and they're never going to be community college students. They're all going to be four-year students. They've all been accepted to UT Austin and LSU and U of H and all these different places with the expectation of taking these courses.
Oh, okay. Anna, go ahead. Sorry, Howard, did you still have something to say? And then Anna, sorry.
Yes, I was just going to say, if we had 2 weeks, we could do this philosophical stuff. We've got 2 hours. I really think we need to start making some proposals for what needs to go in here. And it looks to me like we've already voted with our feet on the paper that we gave you. It looks like there's a consensus for 1301 and 1302 and some version of sophomore lits. I think we need to begin, entertaining motions to do something about this.
I'd be happy to entertain a motion on that.
Anna, Kevin?
Motion. The community colleges, and I'm going to speak for us for a second, we've been doing this. We are working our tails off doing what we thought you guys wanted. And I don't know when it changed that it wasn't right. And I get, and these dual credit students and some of the other students, they know they're not getting it in high school, math, science, or English. And so they're coming to us trying to get a little more ready to come to you guys. So, a survey class is what used to be junior and senior English in high school. Seriously. And then now the community colleges are jumping through hoops trying to meet all the techs for high school when we're not, I don't have a teaching certificate. So we have that side of the game going, and we're trying to align P through K. Seriously, I'm on that committee. And now you guys are all saying that what we're doing isn't right. And all the 200 level or 2,000 level classes from 20 years ago or so are now 3,000 level classes. And what we've done in a survey is not there for an intro. That's what it's kind of sounds like. And that's not even talking about they don't even know how to do a research paper when they graduate from high school, even the honors kids, because it's not on the test.
Okay, Kevin?
They don't learn cursive either anymore.
You're good.
So can we entertain a motion? Is anybody willing to put one on the table here?
I move that English 1301 and 1302 be added to the FOS.
Second?
Any discussion on this? Are we ready to move forward towards a vote, and a call to vote?
Already voted on.
Jen?
Just for a point of clarification, are we creating a single FOS or one that's tracked?
We're going to start with the general English degree, and then we'll come back to the discussions that you had. Once we get a general FOS without the tracks, we'll come back to the discussion of the writing lit and see if we want to do a writing track or something like that as well, okay? All right, can we call to a vote here? All those in favor? Everybody. All right. if we have any motions that we want to move forward at this point. Are we ready to take another one? No, I don't. Okay, let's continue with the discussion. Yeah.
I didn't know if people were interested in talking about the foreign language. Again, we didn't talk about this specifically yesterday, but if a lot of the BA programs included, I know that University of Houston has it as a university requirement for the BA 6 hours, at least on the lower division level. That would be something that would help students streamline for sure, and that might, I don't want to assume, but might be an easy transfer, just to throw it out there.
I have a question about that, actually. So when we looked at it was civil engineering or something that had courses outside the department, it was inside the major. I don't have foreign language inside the English major. I have it inside the College of Liberal Arts, but I don't know that, I mean, I'm asking, is this a category confusion? Like, can we make a field of study that's about what English majors can do that has a requirement in a foreign language which would not be inside the English major? It sounds technically wrong to me to do that if foreign language requirements aren't part of an English degree.
Okay, Kevin?
I'm not sure. I mean, I'm looking at the plan from Tennessee, and they have foreign language 2-year sequence as part of their area of emphasis in English, if I'm reading this
Alan, can you
correctly.
maybe speak on
Yes, you can. Yes, it's part of their overall plan. Again, what they're doing there in Tennessee is similar to what we talked about yesterday, where you're essentially acting as an advisor to students who are going to be English majors and saying, when you get the opportunity, when making your core curriculum selections, please select these. If you don't care what course they take in the core curriculum, in their science or math or social studies or, social sciences, then leave that blank and let them choose whatever they want. But if they're going to have to take foreign language anyway as part of the core, it might be a non-issue. But if you have a preference that they take French or Spanish or Latin, then you might want to jump in and say, please take this foreign language
It's not in the core,
level.
Alan. It's in the, for most of us, it's in what are degree specific for like a BA.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's not really the core, it's in the BA, but we can have anything in this that is for our degree program. So that would include what are requirements for the BA. That is a place that we could go. It is about philosophically, do we think that all of us have BAs, and so we do require this of all our majors, so would we want to be able to put that in? If everybody is saying, yes, an English department person needs this.
In the interest of time, it might be better to think about the ENGL courses that form the FOS, and then if we have additional time, we can talk about the other ACGM courses that fit in. I don't want to give short shrift to the English courses.
Yeah, I think that the suggestion was because he thought it was low-hanging fruit. He was trying to go someplace that he thought was low-hanging fruit because of how his institution works. So I understand what.
Joe?
Well, I was simply going to agree with that. It sounds like what we're doing is saying, well, we can bring it up to 18 hours by adding a foreign language, not because we want a foreign language, but because we want to pad it a little bit. And I don't think that's the rationale.
I don't think that was not, let me just speak directly to that accusation, if I can call it that. That's not at all what I was doing. In the best interest of our students, if we, according to the University of Texas, Dallas doesn't have that requirement, so I'm not pushing it. I just threw it out there as if most BA requirements do require at least 6 hours of foreign language, and this would be a way to allow students to streamline credits, and that's our best interest, right? And that's all I was suggesting.
Okay, William, and then Gretchen.
Well, again, I think the question is less about, and I understand that there are implications for university requirements, but the question is, what do we want community college students to do? What would be good for them if they're going to be English majors? And my guess is, I'm going to ask, that most of us would agree that foreign language would be a great thing for English majors to take, especially if there's a 12-hour requirement for some. Does anybody have 12-hour requirements? So if you have a 12-hour requirement, that means if we're not encouraging them to do it at the community college, they're going to do all 12 hours in 2 years at the upper division. And if a school like U of H, where if they still have to do 33 hours of English at the upper division, that's going to be difficult then to fit everything in. So yeah, individual schools, it may cause problems, Charles, with where UTD accepts those hours, what it takes away from their degree.
Absorb it.
Yeah, so there's room to absorb it.
Elective.
But again, I don't think we're saying that all BA programs now have to require foreign language. We're saying for a community college student in English or wants to major in English, foreign language would be a good thing for them to take while they're at the community college.
Okay, Gretchen and then Sally.
I was just thinking sort of the same thing, where it looks like all of the universities are going to find a place to absorb something they may not necessarily be able to currently absorb easily. And if the preponderance of us have a foreign language requirement, then that is not low-hanging fruit, but a good place for compromise for a majority probably. And like you say, it's a good, learning foreign language helps you learn English better, how English works, and so it would be good for anybody in writing or literature to do it. And then the other idea is I'm sort of still looking for this idea of what can students take at community colleges and bring to us so that they don't have to spend so much time, at TWU. Foreign language would be a great place for that, to start at the community college.
Okay, we've got Anna and Sally who both want to say something, and then we might try and, oh, you're good. And then we might try and think about entertaining a motion.
Okay. One, on those ideas of recommendations, I see with the architecture FOS that they have specific recommendations from the committee. So they recommended courses. So in my tentative list, I'd put, 8 hours of foreign language, or you could put 12 hours, but 8 hours of foreign language. I had also put, this is recommendations, this is not FOS, so this is my way of addressing some of these issues. So I'm pointing them towards the core. And then I put in 3 hours of speech, and I put in 3 hours of sophomore lit. That's under recommendations. That's not under FOS. In that way, we would only put 3 hours of sophomore lit under the FOS, because it sounds like so many of these kids are coming in with 6 hours of sophomore lit anyway. So the problem is too much sophomore lit. It seems like the problem is that we've got an abundance of lower level courses feeding into really what I would say lit or the traditional English degree. So it seems perhaps unnecessary to have them taking 12 hours of sophomore lit and trying to transfer these into one program, and instead saying, okay, if you take 3 within the FOS, and if you take 3 within the core, they can take it under literature, language, they can take it, or some of them can take it under a COA. Then we know that within that community college, either by transferring it in dual credit or 3 in FOS, 3 somewhere else in the core, we got survey covered, and then that would open up some room for some other courses. So we got into the situation. Now, I know we're not tracking here yet, Jen, but I was just trying to think, that would then open up a course, the 2311 for the technical and business writing, which, that does meet that third goal, of, the 60/30s, that we have these workplace marketable skills.
Jen and then Elizabeth.
Hope this isn't too early, but I move that we include a year of foreign language into our FOS.
Second.
6. Because our foreign languages is 4.
Ours is 8.
So ours would be 8. If it's 2, that's why I think she's saying a year. I think it's different.
I was trying to be productively ambiguous.
You understand that to mean any 6 semester credit hours? So if let's say
Of a single language.
of a single language at any level.
Could it be like 6 to 8? Did they have that on Tennessee?
So it could be like intermediate 1 and 2.
Or with labs and some aren't, depending
Right.
on the institution.
That was my intention, like Spanish 1, Spanish 2,
We did just.
Jen, can I just ask a question? Would you see any problem with that, with a student who wants to take some tech writing courses, maybe some computing courses, and get a BS in technical writing, that foreign language is going to be a no-go? Especially for the track that you're interested in? Just food for thought.
Elizabeth also.
Yeah, I'd have to look at what UTSA and Texas A&M San Antonio accept. I'll look real quick.
Okay, we have a motion on the table still. Do we want a second for that?
Elizabeth?
I second the motion.
Okay. So we have a second for that. So we have the idea of 6 hours or of English, or are you saying just the first year of languages, whether it's 3 or 6 or 4? Okay. Okay, and then we have a...
That's a clarification. So they would make certain sense to say 6. I mean, so most language requirements are phrased in terms of total semester credit hours. So for the student who, let's say, places in to Spanish, first semester of Spanish 2, if we insist on just first year, we're really creating, I think, a lot of problems.
Okay,
But the ACGM only lists really 4-hour first, Spanish 1411, Spanish 1412.
Oh.
There is no 3-hour first year Spanish.
That's what I thought, too.
so
Okay.
then
So
8.
so 8 hours of language.
Okay, Elizabeth?
And we have a second on that? Howard, do you
Howard.
still have a second? All right, so any discussion then?
Elizabeth and Apostolos.
My discussion was not on the foreign language, so I am going to pass until we get off this.
On the foreign language question, I'm not ready to, I think we should include our colleagues from the foreign language departments in this conversation. So if we are going to authorize Spanish, we need to have people from the Hispanic studies be included in that conversation. We are here, I believe, to talk about English courses. And of course, we have 14 hours of foreign language requirement, like 4 different courses, but they are outside the English degree. They're not part of the English major, of the English degree. They're part of the university or the college degree. So to graduate from Texas A&M with a college with a large degree, you need to have 14 hours, right? But it's not part of the English curriculum. So I'm not ready to approve foreign language requirement since it's not part of us and since we do not include, right, in the conversation people or colleagues from the foreign language department.
Well, if you look though at like the field of study for engineering or some of that stuff, they have to have a ton of maths, and so they'll include that. Even though math is outside of the engineering department, it's still in the field of study because it's still required. So many of the people here from universities are saying that at least for their BA degree, even if it's not their English degree, at least for their BA, a foreign language is required, and you've just said the same thing. So we're not saying they have to take Spanish or they have to take French. We're saying a year of foreign language, any language they want that would contribute to those 14 hours.
But the institutions then have to accept them.
Yes,
8
they would
hours.
have to accept
That's what I'm
8
saying.
hours. And the way that we're setting this up is, again, we're confusing the major with the degree program. We can look at the total degree program for the FOS.
We have a lot of people. I think Joe, then I saw Kevin, Shane, Gretchen, sorry.
I'm really troubled by the idea that we're going to do an FOS in English that is almost going to have as many hours outside of English as it will in English, that it's going to be, and in fact, if you figure it out, 1301, 1302, that's in the core. Well, I know it's not for some of y'all. And then we got 8 hours of a foreign language, and we've got 3 hours left for literature. I mean, we've got no hours left for technical writing or creative writing. It sounds like foreign language is taking over the English FOS.
Oh. I mean, again, with the foreign language requirement, it doesn't seem like, I mean, all universities are going to be taking transfer credits in foreign languages, correct? I mean, so it's not a matter of we're doing something that would be unusual here. In our degree plan, we have, I think, 14 credits that we require. So we could certainly absorb the 6 to 8. And it would advance the work that our students do to complete the degree, right? If that's the goal here. But I think what we keep struggling with, again, is, okay, once we get to those other credits that, you know, like the surveys, it's where are we going to fit them? We don't currently have all of those slots waiting at the 2000 level. So.
don't think that we made any even consensus sort of decision on whether it's 12 or 16 or 15 or 18 that the FOS is going to be. So the idea that foreign languages with 6 or 8 is suddenly taking over it, that's not really, it's an issue quite yet. But I just wanted to check and see, is it possible to say 6 or 8? Simply because there are 3-hour and 4 hours. Ours is a 12-hour, and so if we have to take 8, we're forcing students to take 2 more. They'll be taking an extra class if they're coming in with the FOS, because you have to get to 12 for us.
But the question, I'm sorry, but forgive me if I'm misunderstanding. The FOS doesn't require native students to do anything. The FOS is just for the students at community colleges who can't take 6 hours. I mean, it's impossible. There's no 6-hour class. There's no 3-hour classes. So the only way the FOS would really come into play is if a student was coming from a community college where they'd have 8 hours of credit. I don't think it would affect how many hours you would require for your native students.
So no. I'm saying, so if you're coming in with 8,
right.
If we have 12, you cannot take a 4-hour course at our institution. You'd have to take it somewhere else to get the 4, or take 3 hours to get 6.
But isn't that the idea? When you have 12, you're assuming 2 years. You're assuming 4 semesters, right? So a student who come in with 8 would have taken 2 semesters. They'd still have to take 2 more semesters. It would just, they'd end up with 14
It's
hours.
credits, it's not semesters. It says credits for us, and so that's what we work off.
Can I just jump in, just say the same thing? We have 6 to 20 hours, and it's by 3-hour credit hours. So if we were talking about this, it would be useful from our perspective to have 6 to 8. So we would guarantee that 6 of those credits, they took 8 credits, their credits would count. They'd satisfy our foreign language requirement, but then we wouldn't have to find a home for the extra 2 credits that would be in limbo. So it's just a matter of logistically lining up the institutions.
Okay, Shane, then Jen.
2 comments here. First of all, we have to be careful about using for example, the engineering stuff, because they have those maths in there because they're actually prereqs for the engineering courses. Foreign language is not a prereq for any English class, so you can't really think they're not equivalents in that way. The other thing is what everybody's doing in terms of pushing the foreign language is. It is in a certain way basically saying these are ways of just us not having to accept any English classes, you guys. And that's exactly what is being told to us. So, because you're talking about a faculty, we don't teach foreign language. So you're telling us we're going to get rid of all your classes that are required, but the foreign language department is going to get bumped up. So it's not going to roll.
Okay, Jen, and, well, actually, Elizabeth, you didn't get to speak.
The only thing I was going to say is I do think there is a consensus from the way we voted to have a approximately 12-hour FOS. That got the most votes, and then a 9 or a 15 got the second most. Okay, 9. So we are somewhere in the, we're in the 12-hour range. I do think that we are trying to not have a painful conversation about the survey courses by having this foreign language course, like as if that's to give them something to do.
Yes.
I would like to move that, I'm going to move and then I'm going to have something for the discussion because I want to find out what to do with those 1-hour survey courses. But I would move that we accept up to 6 hours of the 2,300 survey courses in the FOS.
Do we have a second on that? And then we have a motion on the table.
You've already got a motion. You can't have 2 motions on the table at once.
So we need to decide what to do with this first motion.
Do we want to table the first motion? Okay, could somebody move that be? Oh, okay.
Okay, I agree to table the foreign language discussion.
All right, so then do we have a second for the motion about looking at this?
Second.
Or third? Everett.
All right, do we need discussion?
So just to clarify the motion, we're adding or, are these the highlighted 3? The motion wasn't specific. So we're talking about the 3.
86 hours?
And they have to be sequential? Right. So you're saying they have to take one of the 3 pairs?
Well, in saying up to the 6 hours, I'm basically saying World 1 and 2, Brit 1 and 2, American 1 and 2. I would like to find out what if a student takes the 1 semester version of that for 3 hours. Are we erasing that from the ACGM, or is it just, if they did that, that's fine, they would transfer in 3?
Well, and then it would look like that they wouldn't have fulfilled the FOS, so they'd still have 3 more hours that they would have to take at that.
But what if they took a 3-semester World Lit and a 3-semester American Lit?
Yeah.
That would be
But wouldn't that be redundant? That would be the same course if you did World Literature as 1 semester, and then World Literature 1 and World Literature 2.
Why are we excluding the Mexican-American survey from this?
Because it's not in my motion. That's the only reason.
It's technically a 2300 literature, but it's 51 instead of the 20, 30, 40. Yeah, 10, 23.
So with it on the motion on the table, which would be those paired Brit, American, World, that's what's on the table. Do we have more discussion about that
Can you
particular
scroll
one?
it up so I could see the numbers of the other things?
And I think we had 11 people that liked the paired. I would think we could arrange our recommendation where we insisted that if you took World 1, you better take World 2 as well, where we keep them paired. So you could take early Brit, late Brit, or early American, late American, or early World, late World, but keep them paired, yeah.
Well,
Which is what everyone kind of.
that is not what I meant.
Okay.
I think I meant up to 6 hours of any of those British, American, or World surveys.
But not Mexican.
No, I'm not putting that in right now. But that might be a friendly amendment. You can't really take 6 hours of Mexican. You can only take 3.
But you could do an American and
That's right. But I'm saying up to, so you could do, a student could have only 3, or a student could have up to 6 if they took the 2-part survey, and we would accept those 6 credits. I'm willing to accept a friendly amendment to add Mexican literature to it as well.
I move to then just an amendment to add Mexican-American literature, so it would be all the 2300s except for
co-op, whatever that is.
Beginning with 2321 through 2351?
Yeah.
Okay, is there a second? Does that include 2341?
No, I think we're talking about a survey.
Yeah, she said surveys. So do we have a second, first of all? Okay, second. Shane?
A way of possibly fixing this also, when you're thinking about the 3s, but we also have those 1 semesters which you like. So we could say, take up to and do the 2s, Brit, American, American, World, World, or single semester World, single semester American, single semester Mexican, American, so that you can do a combo of those 3s, those single semester things, and get up to 6, right? So we could actually do that as another possibility.
Can we do a recommendation, Alan? Is it possible to say that we recommend that you either pair them, right? Or that you take the single semester ones in different places so that someone doesn't take one of the half early Brit and then take the full semester Brit? Can we make recommendations?
A recommendation doesn't really carry much weight. I think it would be better just to go ahead and spell out that the options are the pair of British, the pair of American, the pair of World, or pick 2 of the 3 single semester
And
courses.
that's going to
just
have
spell it out that way.
What I don't like about this is this is going to have the effect of excluding Mexican American literature from the FOS, because it means that it will be harder for students to take. So the minute you've taken, let's say British, let's say you've taken you just by chance, because it fits in your schedule, because your mom told you to, for whatever reason, you take the first half of the British survey. From that moment, you are being disencouraged structurally to study Mexican American literature. I mean, that's the real problem there. So I just.
If you included in that list of 4 single semesters, though, where you could choose 2 from the. Yeah, you could choose 2 from World, from the single semester World, single semester American, single semester British.
But if you don't make that choice in the first survey you take, then you actually are creating more work for yourself if later on you discover you want to study Mexican American literature. I mean, that's.
British, though, if you choose British, then you stick with British. If you choose American, you stick with American. If you choose World, you stick with World. All of them. Everybody's getting sort of singled out.
The problem, though, is rotation, too. As we all know, some universities don't offer a given class at a given time. So if we're going to offer, if this is the direction the committee wants to go, one friendly amendment we could consider is taking 6 out of the list and getting rid of the pairing, just to throw it out there. Because the issue would be, I'm at a given university and I'm starting and I want to take an English course, and the only class that's offered is the American or British surveys, not the Mexican American Lit, and I want to take the Mexican American Lit. If I take one of those national literatures, I'm locked into not taking Mexican American literature.
I think
You'd be okay with an early Brit and a late American? That'd be fine?
What, I guess the question is that earlier we were talking about, I think some of our medievalists had said, what if someone comes in then and just takes all of the late? So I'm just taking late, I'm not touching any of the early.
Okay, so Kelly, Gretchen, and then Everett, sorry.
Well, again, we're just speaking about the 2-year level, so it doesn't mean that they couldn't take something more specific or different time periods when they got to the 4-year level. But I think it should just be specified that they can choose any 6 hours, basically. Then they could still take the Mexican-American Lit, except for that there should not be an overlap, such as taking one of the semesters for British Lit and then the whole, you know, right. And that it could be worded that way. If we can specify that they have to take 2 Brit Lits or 2 American Lits, I don't know why we couldn't just leave it general and just specify that they couldn't have those overlapping classes.
Okay, Gretchen and then Everett.
I think this, I'm like, oh my God, do we open the door to the actual, like, what's the difference between 2,000 and 3,000? Because there is a difference between 2,000 survey and 3,000 survey. And in our mind, the way that we separate it, and you all can have your own opinions, but 2,000 level is not about really the content. It's about how, right, to do the reading. And so if you do it out of order, if you do early British and late American, that's fine, because we're talking about how to read literature in these ways instead of a coverage model necessarily at 2,000 level. And so, yeah, that was my idea also. Any 6 of these, as long as you're not overlapping a single semester and a 2 semester, because it is to the whims of, you know, registration, so on and so forth. And if you got, if late, you know, world was it, and then you want to take Mexican American later, you should be able to do so.
Okay.
I'll just say, just as a response, I think we to see how little people are actually invested in the idea of the how. I think if I were to, let's say, propose that we only allow Mexican American literature, since these courses are really about how, I think we discover pretty quickly that people are not just invested in how. Right, that people would say, oh no, it's not just how. So I think that, you know, that some of these, you know, that these inclusions are worth fighting for the most ample sort of content opportunity. But I do agree with you, how is a crucial part of it, but not, you know, not at the expense of the most ample.
Okay, I've got Everett, William, and then Iris.
I would like to point out that according to the AGCM, you do not have to take World Lit 1 before you can take World Lit 2. None of them is a prerequisite. My own personal experience is simply teaching at Rangers. It's not uncommon for me to have a student who, for example, took me for World Lit 1 and then took me later on for American Lit 2 instead of World Lit 2, partly because there is a significant difference. In many ways, for example, British Lit 1 is a great way for preparing them for American Lit 2 if that is what their particular interest is. And I know that there are a number who, if they were to take Mexican American, for example, would want to take that after taking American Lit 1, because it also helps prepare them on one level, those who are more focused specifically on North American interests.
As a question to the 4-year schools, how will allowing the British Lit or American Lit surveys, for example, affect the student who then has to take or chooses to take the 3,000 level British Lit or American Lit survey? Are those, because they're separate course numbers, will there be no problem with a student taking that again? I mean, I know it's a different course, but is there a problem with a student who's done 23-22 and 23-23 and then at the junior level decides to take, after they transfer, decides to take a British Lit survey at the receiving institution?
I think my comment, I'm sorry, may answer that. I've been sitting quite uncomfortably in my 4-year university bubble back here, but if we, say for instance, we do the 6 hours, the student takes 1301, they take 1302, they take World Lit 1, World Lit 2. They not only come to us core complete, but they come to us having taken that we just transferred to the Texas numbering system. The second part of World Lit. All right, so they're core complete and they're ready to start their 300 level. Now, if they take the 2 Brit Lit courses, then those become throwaway courses for us because we don't have any 200 level Brit Lit courses. Our Mexican American course is a 300 level course. So my only concern, if we're talking about transferability, then if you do take those two Brit Lit, then because I'm an advisor, I have to tell that student, unfortunately, you know, and you can only count as one of them as elective, because our electives have to be 300 and 400 level courses. So I'm kind of nervous about the 6 hours, because if they're not the world, or if they're not American, or if they're not African American lit for us, they won't satisfy the core and part of our degree for the BA.
Well, and also keep in mind that if we put those in as the FOS, that not only can you, I mean, you can put them in as electives, but then your 2,000 level courses are satisfied in your degree.
Okay, Everett, Jason, and Kevin.
I just simply would like to point out that in some of the classes I've taught Beowulf, I have a number of students who took Beowulf in high school. Taking Beowulf at college, which is not that different from, say, taking a 1,000 level or 3,000 level, does not mean that suddenly they've wasted their time on the Beowulf unit at the college. They're at a different position. Having experienced it once prepares them for experience second time. Beowulf, because of its particular foundation, I have taught in both World Lit and British Lit. I've had students who've taken both British Lit and World Lit from me, so they've taken Beowulf from me twice, from the same professor, and yet it was a different experience each time because of the different focus, the different emphasis. Having someone take a 2,000 level British Lit and then a 3,000 level British Lit does not mean the 3,000 level is a waste. If anything, I think it improves their likelihood to truly benefit from the 3,000 because of the preparation the 2,000 have given them. And I think that we're forgetting this very crucial pedagogical truth.
Okay, and just one response to Iris right quick. I would think it would become a matter, especially if community college is transferring to you, if we wrote for the whole state adding those literatures, but then the specific community college would do a pathway to your college and say, okay, we know you can take all the literatures, but you better take World or you're in trouble.
Right, and that's what we have.
The FOS requires that. It requires them to satisfy that requirement.
Okay, sorry, Jason.
Just to build off what Ira said and William's question, you know, and I know I mentioned this yesterday, and University of Houston is one of many universities here, so I feel selfish raising my own issues, but the lower division requirements, again, for us are core, and the 2 comp classes are part of that core, and that's it for English courses for lower division. The University of Houston views it as a liberal arts lower division. So for us, if we added 6 credits of these English courses, the consequences, and we'd have to accept them, the consequences would be we'd have to change our catalog across the board, we'd have to change our curriculum across the board, we'd have to move upper division classes to lower division, and then find out in a university that serves more than 40,000 students how we're going to rotate these surveys at the lower division and at the upper division, and it's going to create a very difficult networking system.
Remember the dual credit. It's already been going 20 years.
But if you're adding credits onto an already established major, that's the difference between field of study that I raised earlier and the lower division versus upper division.
But there are a couple things I think that you have to remember too, is that yes, there'll be those 6 hours, and so either it can go, and I'm assuming that your institution, I think as Elizabeth was saying, is already doing some of these things, whether you know it or not, and they're probably taking some and putting them in that one core course that can be language, philosophy, and et cetera, right? It's probably one of 3 hours is going in there.
One of them, but not all of those are approved, obviously.
Well, and then the other 3, I'm assuming, is probably coming into electives. And so you have the ability to be able to do this. We don't say, because you have no 2,000 levels, it doesn't satisfy anything part of that. It'd just be, where would you place those in your?
Right. The issue is to the notion of portability of credits, because in the catalog it says no lower division class can be counted for or transferred into upper division. Right. So it would have to be a gen ed requirement or something to that effect. And the surveys that would be wonderful, there's a 3 credit for us for language, philosophy, and culture, the core credit. Any of these surveys that would satisfy that, of course, would satisfy that core credit. But those that don't would have to be found another home.
No, Jason, that's great, because I was going to ask you, how your university with that liberal arts core satisfied the humanities requirement, because that's how UT does it, right? Like one of these 3 hours of literature survey would satisfy the core. And I just want to keep our heads on how many I want us to really think hard about how many credits we want in this FOS, only because of that for me, frightening 18-hour, the FOS could count as the core that we heard yesterday, which means if we make the FOS too big with a lot of foreign language in it, it'll all of a sudden count for math and science and history, which freaks the hell out of me in terms of the Texas core. Huh?
The FOS substituting for the core is only relevant to the associate's degree. It doesn't satisfy the core at your university when it's transferred. It's just that a student can get an associate's degree without completing the core if they complete the FOS.
But they still have to have the 60 hours.
Yeah, so 60 hours.
So they need 60 hours
So it would be a
plus
bad
the
idea
FOS.
if they're planning on transferring. It would be a bad idea for them to substitute the FOS for the core because
We don't
they
have
need
to.
those classes.
We don't have to give them the core once they.
Right.
Okay, Kevin, and then Gretchen, and then Apostolos.
Just going back to whether, UTA could absorb the Mexican-American literature, we could. In our core, we have a topics course, also topics in literature, that we could use for that to count. So that wouldn't be a concern for us.
Just a question. So I think that's at least 3 of us that are talking about absorbing one of these surveys into that. What if a student takes philosophy at the community college too? That we only have 1 slot for language, philosophy, and culture in transferring over their core. So which one goes? And we only have 1. Yes.
So do we. We're the same way.
Our major is 42 credits. We may have to think about that.
But if the major's 42...
And then foreign languages, and then a minor. We all have a required minor. That's what leaves us with 1 elective slot.
Okay, so
Yeah. Yeah.
Apostolos, Sally, and then Jen.
Just a clarification question for Jason. So what do you do when students bring all of these Texas Common Course Number courses? They just go to the work not applied, or you cannot? Because we accept all of them. We are under the impression that we're obligated by the state to accept those courses. Provided that there is space in their degree plan.
Yeah, the core classes, there's a pre-mapped, pre-approved classes that go into the core for the 42 credits, and that's where those classes would originally would go toward.
So all of the English survey courses go into the core? You allow, okay.
Not all of them, and just to address the specific credit requirements of the core. Yeah.
Because for us, we don't allow English majors to use English classes for the core. We want them to take philosophy, we want to take art, we want to take this and that, unless they're cross-listed courses like linguistics or film or so.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
When we get those extra courses in, we're working out our degree plan, we end up putting them under the English section, but they just count as extra lower credit hours. The student is still missing those upper credit hours, which would miss the point of what we're trying to do, is getting them out of here sooner. I'm wondering why we wouldn't consider just having 3 hours of survey in the FOS, and then under our recommendation, recommend that students seeking the FOS take a survey course, 3 hours of survey, under literature, language, and culture. Because the problem is we got too many surveys, but at the other end, we haven't even talked about, how we could possibly get technical and professional communication in here, another course that I don't think that we would have as much competition, once it's brought into the degree. It's not going to, I know, like you said, we've got to give something, but it seems like we've got an abundance of surveys, and we haven't even gotten to one, which I do think is necessary in the FOS for community colleges.
Okay, Jen.
I was just going to say that it sounds as though the 4-year colleges are pretty much okay with figuring out how they would absorb 6 hours of survey. If I'm right, I think we should vote. If I'm wrong, then I'm wrong.
So if we're calling to a vote,
But I think just to clarify, the friendly amendment idea was an add Mexican American to that, but also I'm so sorry, your name, Sally's point about having 3 instead of 6 is something to consider as well, and then taking those other 3 from the lit surveys and moving them, not saying no other English courses, but saying, do we want 3 from the surveys and then 3 from one of the writing tracks as a possibility?
Okay, so accepted. Okay.
Mexican American, just a Mexican American is the only friendly amendment that's been added right now.
I would just like to try to clarify the friendly amendment because I lost track too. Yes, the Mexican American is in there, but in that discussion, I also heard Elizabeth say that she would be okay with 6 hours, and I'm sort of riffing on Kelly and Elizabeth here. That's the 6 hours would come from any of those 7 single semester, or any of those 7 surveys, and that that we would have to somehow specify that the world 1 semester, the British 1 semester, and the American 1 semester could not double dip.
No overlap.
Overlap.
Right.
Is that correct? Did I hear that? Because the first time, your first motion was that it would be, we'd have to pair the surveys, right? 1 and 2, 1 and 2, 1 and 2?
I didn't think I was trying to pair the surveys, although I probably was working under the assumption that the students would more naturally take the continuous survey, and then I was trying to make a space for simply the fact that they could take the 1 semester survey, only because that exactly matches up the course that we teach on campus, and it would seem crazy to me to come here and say, in the FOS, you can take a 2 semester survey, but we don't actually teach that, and the course that we teach, we're not accepting. But I do realize in the course of the conversation that adding the Mexican American literature in there, because it's on the ACGM, is fine, and really any 2 semesters of these surveys work, although I don't know how you preclude the weird, okay, imagine student who takes the 1 semester American Lit course and then tries to take the late American survey, right, which would seem to me to be like taking the same course twice because there's too much overlap. But I don't
we have
know.
to write that in.
Yeah.
I think we just
Yeah.
write that in as part of it, that if you take the 1 semester survey in either American, British, or world, that you cannot take
part of the same survey.
But I'm not an advisor, but I can only imagine the kind of advising nightmare that it's going to be to police this soft requirement. I mean, what if the problem we're trying to solve is to make sure that students don't just do 20th century literature, let's break up the survey. I think it's not unreasonable to say that a key part of our discipline happened before 1945 or 1850.
So are you trying to
or
say
17
take at least one of the earlies and one of the lates, like that?
Or just to say you do any of these, any one of these, break up the surveys in some way so that you would take an early, I think that's totally legit to insist that.
So 3 hours out of this group or 3 hours out of this, is that what you're trying to say?
That you do the first half of the world, for example, or the big world that includes a lot of, that includes early, and then any of the others.
I think this is where you see all the 6s next to the surveys of 1 in each, which is sort of an interesting blip on that screen of 11 people saying for the whole survey and 6
Mexican
as the
American
first
come
half.
late or early?
Pardon?
It just seems like that suggestion, and I like it a lot, would take Mexican American out again, because where does that come?
Go ahead, Everett.
I'd simply like to point out, having done advising, I'm not fond of doing advising, but I've done advising for the 2-year. No, this would not be a nightmare. Knowing not to overlap is very easily done. Most of the advising includes programming, which automatically tells us if you try to do the overlap, no, it's not allowed.
Yeah.
This is a complete non-issue that would
Okay.
really be a waste of our
Great.
time to concern ourselves with.
I think because we're so concerned about the number of extra hours we're going to have with these surveys, we've got to discuss before we vote on that if we're going to accept 6 hours of survey in the FOS, understanding that that is going to result in students arriving, in many cases, to four-year colleges with extra lower credit courses that we're going to have to somehow pull into the curriculum, that we make, we move on that. Then how are we going to discuss, now let's look at some other lower level courses that we'd like to bring into the curriculum, like the technical and professional communication or the creative writing. If it's already an issue that we think that the kids are going to arrive, the students are going to arrive with too many survey courses, that already our programs are going to have to drop upper level courses, how can we even then discuss these other courses? I don't think that they're going to be given, a fair examination. I really don't.
I do understand that. I understand exactly what you're saying, Sally. I think I'm trying to go off of looking at what most people said. And if you look at the creative writing and technical writing, it's a lot fewer than the others. And I think that we're hoping that we can do a track that you would then be able to substitute this for this. So if you take a writing track, the writing track would maybe get rid of one of the lit surveys and add in a technical writing or something like that. So when we get to the tracks, I think we can do that kind of thing, or add in the creative writing, or we could do something like that. But to me, if we could take this next step with this motion that's on, try to see if we have votes to be able to do that, then we'll come back and work on those tracks, because I think you're right. I think that writing track's going to be very important, a part of this, if that makes sense.
Kevin, Shane, and Jason, I think after we finish that, we've probably brought up a lot of what we need to, and we probably need to go ahead and vote.
I hate to go back, but so it may not be an advising nightmare, but would it possibly be a scheduling nightmare for whoever's got to decide how many sections have to be offered any given semester? No?
No.
Okay.
Because they still have variety.
Okay.
Complete non-issue.
I had a question for the two-year schools. How many of you actually teach the single semesters and the 2 semesters? Because we only teach the 2 semesters. Does anybody do all
We
that?
don't teach the single semesters ever.
You only teach the 2?
Only the 2.
So we don't have to worry about the overlap at any of these schools because it's never going to happen? Yeah.
We rarely do it at Cisco.
We don't even have it in our catalog.
It's in our catalog.
You do. You do it.
Jason?
We mostly offer the 2-semester surveys, but we offer one section of a single semester class every semester.
I just had a logistical question about the tracks. This wasn't clear to me yesterday as well. Because our various BA programs have different concentrations, some of us have concentrations which are in a sense a track, but our BA is wrapped up as a degree program. So the concentrations all fold up into a BA. So if we're voting on a FOS, given the time, my worry is that some discussion of tracks would just be ideal and utopian, and then we have the FOS in place. So if our discussion of tracks is to retroactively go back and change what we already voted on, I'm not clear about the protocol for track discussion.
This is my understanding, and Alan, you could see if this looks like something we could do. My understanding is what we would do is we'll have this general one that would be for the BA in English in general, and then we'll have a track, for example, for writing, and we'll add that track for writing. And then if you are at an institution, if you have someone transfer in, for example, at your institution where the creative writing transfers in a lot better than the other, you might want to bring people in on a writing track, right? And have them come in like that. I think that we'd be able to do that because it's a specialization for you.
But if it's an FOS track, wouldn't we all have to do it, right? We'd all have to, the state would agree there's these tracks, and then we would all have to accept track students, and that's a problem that doesn't match up with our institutions.
So we get a writing track, and what if it really has a technical function? And now we're going to bring that to you. Now it's not an issue of too many survey courses. Now you've got 9 hours of maybe these writing courses. Yeah.
Thank God Brad is answering my email immediately. So technical writing would transfer in as a rhetoric course. Does not transfer into the English major, though, at UT.
It would for us, but as an upper division class, that's a problem.
So I guess, Gary, maybe you could answer this. If we have a track, does every university that doesn't have tracks have to accept that track then?
No, I think that what you would do is structure and perhaps provide some language that says, that if you're just going the lit route, take these courses. If you want to do a technical writing program, and depending how many, and not program per se, but track within a program, then say take these courses. And so that would become an advising thing of either do this or do that. And that would need to be communicated in the document clearly, because it's, and I guess maybe a show of hands, do it?
Like a computer science degree.
Yeah, right. Maybe show of hands, how many universities have the writing track or the writing component? What is that?
Technical writing? What kind of writing are you referring to? Well, there's a difference in creative writing and rec comp, for example.
Okay, however y'all answer the question. I'm a computer science guy, so
So I have a question. We don't have a writing track. We have an English minor in tech writing. So if you do take a 2000, sorry, just adopted the system. If you do have a 2000 tech writing course and you're an English major, it would transfer in as an elective, not if not, then it wouldn't necessarily count toward the degree. So what happens in that instance?
Any conversation about elective, about a course in a field of study, it has to apply. Electives of, well, it counts for a lower division course, and then all the lower division courses are mapped out. That's not an elective, that's just an extra course. And in essence, to complete a 120-hour degree, a student is going to have 123 hours in that single example.
Even
right?
if we don't have a lower level tech writing course, we don't.
Well, if you put tech writing in the field of study, it's of the 120, you now have 117. That's the easiest way to explain it.
But that's only if those people have a track at their university.
Yes, if y'all structure it as a track of saying, here's the lit pathway, and the way the conversation seems to be going right now, of take Comp 1, Comp 2, and take 6 hours of literature, and that's the field of study, or take Comp 1, Comp 2 to do this tech writing at selected universities maybe, and then that becomes technical writing and whatever the other course, creative writing, if you're going to put those two in there. So you're saying take an or, and the writing pathway, if I understand, would be 2307, 2311, and then the lit route would be take 6 of these, and there's a lot of those.
Yeah, okay, Elizabeth?
So I feel like, rhetoric is a different department than English, which is not to say that the courses y'all teach in technical writing and in writing studies don't transfer to UT. They do. They don't transfer to the English major. And there is nothing I can do to get them into the English major, right? It's a different department. Creative writing is also a certificate in the English program that's separate. So, that's like a slightly different kettle of fish too. It's just like one that we house as opposed to one that's like literally located in a different building.
Yeah, I think that's why we were talking about the tracks, because I think there's a lot of places where there is not that
no track.
option
I can't make
to be
that
able
a track,
to go that
but
direction.
it does. Your courses do count and do transfer over. They just don't transfer over in the English major.
Could you turn on your microphone, please?
That's the first thing I say. Where are you planning to go? Let's pull that up. And I show them how, because they don't know how yet, and let's look at that degree at wherever. And this is what, then you need to make sure you take this one and you take this one, or it's not going to transfer. I mean, some of that's over here, and we have actual transfer advisors on the main campus. I'm not on the Corsicana campus, so I can call them, or I can send the student to them, or I email and say, this student wants to go here, she wants to do this, will you help us? So there's going to be that too. We're going to help them.
I think you were first. I give up. I just wanted to point out that this track business, I hear what Elizabeth is saying, but most of us who are still in writing studies with the PhD, all those qualifications in writing studies are still trapped in English departments. We still have the ENGL brand. And I was just talking to Jason, and his colleagues in Clear Lake took ENGL and changed it to WRIT. So and down in the Valley, they separated, so English is now 2 departments. They share the degree, so it's very complex, and so we're not talking about writing studies as not in the discipline.
And Jason, Charles.
It sounds like maybe we're thinking about after 1301 and 1302, doing the split there, that we have either 6 hours of the lit survey or 6 hours of something along the lines of 2311 or 2307, right, TechCom or creative writing, and then perhaps we could add in the practicum after that for that 6-hour component. That would keep us at 12 hours. They would be all ENGL courses. They're all in the ACGM.
But no matter which track the student takes, all universities have to accept it. Is that correct?
No, they were just saying is if we don't have that track, we don't take those students that come on that track.
And they would default then to the lit track, basically, right? Because all universities have literature. That's where we've always been.
I have a specific response to that point, but which is that at the beginning we talked about having this FOS be something that every student in English would take. My concern with creating tracks, whatever the track is in, is that we all know that if we create FOS tracks, we're going to end up with tracks in our degrees because someone is going to come and say, hey, the community colleges have these tracks, and by not having a track, we're missing out on all of this community college transfer enrollment. Whatever track we make here, I would bet anything we will end up with that track because that track will get leveraged, whatever it is, to create a parallel degree plan in the 4-year institute.
Jason, Elizabeth had a question, and then Anna.
Excuse me, part of the problem with tracks too is the nomenclature of track. One of the problems that we had at University of Houston was that the coordinating board unilaterally this year decided to take creative writing, which was, we had English creative writing as a degree, right, that's folded into English, and separate it out as creative writing with no approval from the provost down, which alarmed University of Houston immensely. So we combated that by we're getting rid of that degree that they just created on their own and folded up our BA as English BA and folded up the creative writing and applied linguistics and English as 3 concentrations within a current degree. The problem with tracks is it opens up the possibility for severing English into different disciplines, which has implications for departments and student credit hours and money and power and all the rest. So I just think adding tracks might be a logistical nightmare. That's one. But 2, if we add 6 credits of literature or 6 credits like of a writing track, if a university like University of Houston doesn't have any of them at the lower division now as requirements, we're talking about adding 12 credits potentially that we have to negotiate both sides. So it becomes a big difficulty.
So it would be 6 or 6, right? The lit survey, which I think you're saying is transferring into the core curriculum, or 6 writing. And, it's a shame that no community college English courses transfer into your degree. But, so it is within our purview.
If I could just say, again, we accept all the comp classes, 1301, 1302, and language, philosophy, and culture, 3 credits as well. So that's 9. All transfer in.
Yeah. Into the core, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
And do we mind, can we see if we can call this to a vote? We're almost to 11 and we're rehashing the same things. If we can call what's on the motion that's on the floor to a vote?
And that's the 6 hours of the surveys, including the Mexican American.
With just the one statement that there wouldn't be that overlap. Just the one semester that goes long. So if you took a 1 semester British, you couldn't take one of the other 2 British. If you took a long world, you couldn't take the other. If you took a long American, you couldn't take the other. Mexican American is in there. Mexican American is one of the choices that you can take.
Exempt from any of the...
Exempt from any of the exclusions.
Okay, so let's...
All right, so can I have all those in favor?
Can I ask something? The Mexican American is a choice or is a...
Choice.
The choice, okay.
All those in favor? All those opposed? Any abstentions? So that passes. So right now as we stand, we have a 1301, 1302, and the 6 hours of the survey where you can take it in those varying ways. So with that, then we have two choices here. We can go on and take a look at a track, if we want to do a track and decide whether we want to do a track. We can look at just adding another 3 hours, but remember that most people said how many hours?
12.
12 was the place that most people were standing. So we can make just a decision of whether we want to add anything else or we want this as the FOS.
I have a third option. I'm sorry. I just asked Gary. It is within our purview, if tracking doesn't work, just to have another FOS in writing studies, English 1301, English 1302, and then the 6 hours, where they're not necessarily, where they're not called tracks, if that causes the four-year universities an issue.
You could name it the literature field of study and the writing field of study if you wanted to.
Rhetoric, writing rhetoric.
I think what we were saying is we don't want tracks.
Well, he's...
I don't like the word tracking either. I might either go this way or that way.
If we created essentially, instead of a track, quote unquote, we had created a separate field of study, would that be a separate committee, or could this committee do that?
I think if we went back to a nomination process, we would keep it all.
Okay.
My question is that what does that field of study map to then? Because right now, this field of study that we've just talked about maps to the BA in English, right? What does that field of study, if we say a field of study in writing, what does it map to?
Well, okay. Well, right, and rather than track specialization, because it's an option within the degree, and you find this in many disciplines to where, like in math as an example, a lot of people who get a degree in math want to be teachers, and then there's also people who get a math degree who want to be mathematicians. We had the same conversation in biology. Do you want to be a biologist or do you want to be a teacher? And so maybe that helps a little bit, but if you have these pathways or these specializations within your disciplines, and naming two of them is the best way to communicate, meaning two fields of study, take Comp 1, Comp 2, and some combination of Lit, and call that one of them, and then call another one a BA in English with the specialization in creative writing. Take Comp 1, Comp 2, and those two courses. If that's the method that works for y'all, that's, I don't see that as a big issue with us.
Okay, Kevin, and then William, and then Joe.
I'm just wondering if anyone else might be concerned about unintended consequences, that we're producing this so quickly. Maybe what we have so far might be a good start. Let's see how that works before trying to make it even more complicated.
Yeah, I agree with Kevin, and I would ask about the idea of a separate FOS. What happens if a student completes the field of study in writing and then tries to transfer to a university that doesn't have that specialization? Because the administrative code says the institution has to accept those classes as lower division requirements for the degree program, and the degree would still be in English. So it seems to me that's a problem with having a separate field of study.
Okay, Joe.
Well, another problem is Elizabeth told us they've got a Rec Comp program. Is there a BA in Rec Comp there now? So does that mean that program would have to accept this field of study?
Does the English field of study or the writing field of study?
The writing field of study.
It sounds like it would, and I am not. I am telling you right now, you would not have gotten me if you had done a writing FOS advisory committee, you would have gotten somebody from the rhetoric and comp program at UT instead. Totally different. I mean, joint faculty at the graduate level, completely separate program and faculty at the undergraduate level.
Okay, how many other universities have a separate writing comp program? And
We don't have one in English, so that's a separate question. There's no such writing. There's no comp track.
Have it in technical writing, like we're moving towards that in technical writing, so we'll have a separate one there. That won't be our BA in English.
And
We don't have a rhetoric degree. We used to have one as a PhD level, but it's been merged together into an English degree. Most of the faculty who are rhetoricians are in our department. There are a few in communications.
Okay, Anna. All right, sorry. Anna, Shane, Jason.
I think maybe just we should step back. And a lot of times I tell my students when they kind of get real crazy, less is best. Let's step back a minute and relook at the outline, and maybe we stick with what's already here, with what we have, because there's a lot of institutions who already are. We've been working with this, so and when we went around our table over here, I wrote down. And everybody said, with the exception of a couple people, 1301, 1302, because that basically we were told, and 6 hours of literature, and then the creative or the tech writing. So maybe that's where we're at looking now to see, because I know the question came up, is or the right word for that between those two classes, or however, and then that puts us at 15 hours to see if anybody can live with that. And please, the grandiose discussion seems to always forget the dual credit student. That's been forced on this group, whether universities realize it or like it. I'm really sorry, but you're getting the product of what we've been given also. So for all working together, I think being general for all the people this is going to is really better, and not creating tracks or new classes or a whole bunch of other things. That's just me, because things get to be interpreted so many ways.
Okay, Shane and Jason.
So U of H doesn't have separate writing. UHCL specifically does have a separate writing program. So that is another school we have to take into account that would not count those the same way.
And I would just ask us if we've, this is why I was mentioning Sally's point about before we voted on the 6 for literature, to consider if we wanted to include writing in that, because if we were looking at parity and thinking about our decision-making modalities, we used numbers to determine privileging the surveys. And if you look at those numbers, the majority of people privilege 9 to 12 credit hours, not 15. And we've just established 12. That's one thing that I think we need to think about, because I'm all in favor of stopping at 12 for all the reasons that we've been talking about. So in terms of the tracks, the University of Houston does not have a RCP track. There's credits that are built into the major. In the creative writing track, concentration has very rigorous entrance. You have to have portfolios and so on and so forth. So no lower division classes would be allowed to transfer into creative writing, and that would be a hard stop for us. So that the tracks for writing don't seem to work.
Okay, I have just a quick question, kind of building on what Anna's saying, and for our 2 years here. I know that we do a lot of dual credit as well at my institution, and most of those dual credit students, no matter how you approach this, are just, they don't end up core complete. They don't end up with the full field of study. They'll end up partial. They're going to probably take both histories. A lot of times they get both political government. Sometimes they get economics. They usually get both Englishes, English 1301, 1302. We have maybe a couple classes that are at the junior level who might get like one lit or 1 or 2 lits, but they still probably wouldn't complete the entire field of study, nor the entire core often, that they'll have a huge portion of it. And so I don't know, even though that's very important, I don't know that the whole field of study, does that make sense, goes completely on top of them, since many of them, I think, would probably be incomplete, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Can I see just a show of hands, just so that we can see for me, how many think that we should go ahead and talk about either a separate FOS or a track, or how many think we should just continue and finish up with this basic FOS? So how many think that we should finish with just the basic FOS? Okay, all right, so that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna take an overall vote that this would, as we have it now, is the FOS. If someone wants to put a motion forward for me, that we can do that, and then we'll take a final vote.
I so move.
Second, yeah.
We're not going to talk about the writing, the comp, and why is that called tracking?
Yeah.
Why was that called tracking or a separate FOS? Why can't it just stay this FOS it is here?
What we just had is a motion just to see if we're going to have what we have right now as passing as our FOS. And if it doesn't, then we'll come back and see if we want to add other things. But I forgot we still have the tabled foreign languages.
Jen?
Just as a reminder, that really privileges literature over writing, and again, it perpetuates the status quo, which is, we think, because we love literature so much, we want all students to go in there when the jobs simply aren't there.
But we did say, though, this is part of the discussion. I'll just bring it. We can remind us that when we passed the 6 credits of the comp classes, and then in our discussion of the literature classes, Sally brought up, should we think about having 3 from the surveys and 3 from language, or from writing, to get to the 9 to 12 that the preponderance of people wanted, and this body voted to have 2 literature.
So if we approve the FOS right now, right, which is probably going to pass, does that mean discussion is over, or we continue with either second FOS or a track on it?
Well,
that's my question.
As I said, I think that we'll have this, and then we can, after we finish getting something passed for this and we have this, then we can come back and talk about where we want to go. We still have an hour after that. So we can go in whatever direction we want to after that, but then we'll at least have, either we will have this as a basic FOS for right now for the BA in English, or we won't at the end of this.
And mathematically, it does not actually privilege literature. 6 semester credits, 6 are given to writing, 6 are given to lit. So, I mean, it's 50-50 in the FOS.
My other concern is simply this. I mean, I know after we pass this, we are then going to have the public take a look at it. We're going to have the institutions take a look. One of the reasons I'm moving this, and admittedly I like literature, but I also like composition. I have PhD in both. One of the reasons I want to do this is I'd like to be able to have something to present and find out what the public response to it is, what the response of other people is. This way we have something to present, and then we will have more information to deal with. Because frankly, I think most of us here feel that there's a lot of information we have brought here that we did not realize was necessary for this particular meeting. Mm-hmm. I realize that I'm setting myself up for another meeting, which means I'm setting myself up for another hotel with bad food. Nevertheless, I think it's worth it for my students.
Well, Everett, I think that's true. I think that once this goes out to public comment, as Gary told us, that they'll be coming back with information to us, and if there's some substantial things, we'll come back together and have that discussion as well. And there may be a point where we have to look into, Al and I had talked about that we're going to have to look into to see how many of us have degrees that are bachelor's degrees in a writing area, right? Technical writing bachelor's degrees, creative writing bachelor's degrees, rec comp bachelor's degrees. We need to take a look at that too, because that may be a separate group that comes in and has to deal with FOSs for those as well. So there are those opportunities as well. So yeah, I think that that hopefully as comments come in, we're going to have some things to deal with, but there at least is something out there for them to look at if we want to do that. Are we ready to call for a vote?
We have to do the foreign language.
Jen, was that yours, whose was the foreign language? Was that yours? What do you want to pull it back up on the table? What do we want to do with that?
Continue to table.
Okay. All right, so let's go ahead then with calling for a vote. All those in favor with the idea that we would have the 1301, 1302, the surveys, 6 hours without the overlap, but otherwise including all plus the Mexican American. All right, all those in favor? All those opposed? Any abstentions? Abstentions, okay.
Okay, I think I counted 19-4 and 4, 19-4 and 4 opposed. Because it was 4 opposed, yeah.
Okay.
Oh. I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Joe. Oh, can you revise your vote? Okay, 2 opposed or 4 opposed? Okay, so 5 opposed, 18 for.
Abstain.
That's the right number. What, we're 23?
No.
Where we are? What's our number?
23.
23.
Okay, so that's passes, so this right now will be what we put forward as the FOS. Now we have an hour where we can come back and start talking about, with the idea that we may be gathering information about what ones will be for what degrees are out there. I literally don't know what universities out here have degrees in these particular writing areas. Maybe something we need to gather information on and send to everybody. But also, I think we have the right to be able to talk about some of these other things we want to do with the writing, right? Is that something that we do want to talk about a separate FOS, or do we want to talk about it as having a track at some point? I think that's up for discussion if you guys want to go to that direction.
Can we take a break?
Sure, get some coffee. Is that okay with everybody? Let's grab some coffee here, take a few minutes and get some coffee and everything.
How long is the break? 15 minutes.
We'll go to the restroom. If we could get started, please, I'd appreciate it. Sorry, my voice is loud.
I direct the Writing Center at my school. Yes. Okay, we do have some key facts from the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board on writing programs that we thought we would start with just by bringing it to you all, everyone's attention, and then we could kind of move on just with discussing a little bit more about that idea. Since we do have a field of study, basically, so go ahead.
This is information about what universities have actually separate either technical writing, creative writing, or rhetoric composition programs. Those are 3 universities have technical writing, 3 have creative writing, and 1 has a separate rhet comp right now. Now, that does not take place that there are separate tracks and certifications and those kinds of things, but these are the actual degree programs that are separate with that. So I just wanted to get that information to you.
So looking at Texas Tech, I know they're not here today. Sally and I are both products of that program. It's the largest.
Yeah.
Okay, congratulations. So you're looking at the English FOS. That would really mess things up for them. They're bachelors in Tech Com, which again, it's the largest Tech Com program in Texas. The literatures would have to transfer in, in core or something else. But in terms of the English courses that, again, prepare students to major in that, it would behoove them, it would behoove those students if we could get, I don't know, a separate FOS in English/Tech Com that is something like maybe English 1301, English 1302, technical writing. Maybe stop there, maybe add a practicum.
I think that there seems to be a lot of agreement that we've got some major issues to discuss about kind of writing and how we would come about going for those, especially for technical and professional writing. And so I'm wondering if, and it's up to you how you want to do this, but is this something that we want to come back together with, also maybe inviting some of our colleagues that may be in those separate areas who actually have someone from Texas Tech who has the technical writing, from UT who's in the rhet comp, some people who have the creative writing. Those people have those different degrees, and maybe get them here to be able to talk about it. And if we want to do that as a separate FOS leading into those particular programs, it seems to me that we need some feedback from some of those places that have that, because they're left out of the discussion right now. What do you think about that?
Let me borrow this real quick. I feel fairly comfortable advocating for Texas Tech. I keep in touch with those instructors, with the program, with the structure, with the requirements, both at the student level and the graduate level, and then the faculty stuff that goes on. So I feel comfortable advocating for Texas Tech. I can't speak for anyone else.
Jason?
And just in terms of parity, and Elizabeth has mentioned this before, this wasn't on the agenda, right? And I think that if we were going to be talking about writing or creative writing FOS, I feel unqualified to speak for my faculty about that. And I feel like, considering the import of it, that we would probably want respective colleagues from those fields here. That's just my opinion.
Cliff and then Joe, the only thing I would bring up based on the numbers we had here, now I think a lot of places probably do have some kind of certificate or anything, and I think some people definitely with separate departments or degrees may feel more comfortable having some representation. At the same time, that the small number of degrees may mean you might not get a larger university. Based on what Alan was saying, if they did just like a completely separate committee, it would have like 6 people on it. So it might be one of those things where it was still this group, but invitations, like she's saying, invite some of those people from UT Tech or from your institution as well, if you knew someone specific that you thought should be part of the conversation.
Yeah, perhaps, like, if you can speak, to that, then you come. But if you can't, bring a colleague, so you still get down to one vote, because we've got to stay with that 23 number. I'm sure, so many community colleges, so many state schools.
Cliff, Joe?
Look, if I could jump in here for just a minute, please. Public meetings are tightly construed. Y'all are all appointed by our board. We don't have a lot of latitude of going in and starting just inviting other people to participate. State statute says committees are limited to 24 people, and I think we have 24 people here. Now, we can invite people to provide technical expertise, but we can't bring them in and just make our circle larger. It's not that that's part of why the 30-day comment period is there. Now, y'all can take a charge of go back and consult these people, solicit input, and then bring that back. We can look at possibly a subcommittee that gives kind of a different avenue, but then let me share with you that and I think we talked about this a little bit yesterday. We're responding to a legislative mandate that said for us to create 25 fields of study from last session till session starts this coming January, right? And that's what we're working on. But we're also working on trying to impact the greatest number of students. And so with having 5 or 6 programs at selected institutions, I'm not real sure that's going to bubble up on our radar. And then one last thing about being a bureaucrat I'm going to share with you is just if we decided to convene another committee to do this, we have to draft rules. We have to put them out in the registrar. We have a 30-day comment period. They have to go to our board. We're already behind the curve of going to our June and July subcommittee and then board meeting. So they have to go September, October. And then we have to take nominations, which if we took those September, October, we could take the nominations in December, January, and then we can convene the committee probably sometime next March or so. Bureaucracy is a slow process, and that's kind of the timeline. And one of the things we would have to do first is try to tease out how many graduates there actually are, and then try to figure out if we can separate it from this field of study. And quite honestly, I'll tell you my reservation, if it's going to start with Comp 1, Comp 2, and then maybe have 2 other courses, that seemed like a whole lot of work, what I just described, to get a different population here, because I told you it's going to take about a year, right? And so that's kind of, let's not start recreating another committee. Okay.
I appreciate that feedback, Gary, and I think that I don't think we were thinking in terms of trying to make them voting members or anything. It was just kind of getting impact. But we already have your FOS for your 25 ones, and we can keep in mind that this is going out there for comment. So those universities that have these writing programs can also comment and say, hey, this is missing for us, and make it so that it's something that we have to bring back and discuss as well.
Cliff and Joe, I do really agree, though, with just to back up what Candy's saying. I like the idea of it still probably being this committee, but having that voice, at least consulting with some of those people and seeing what they said, and then being a voice for them. But Cliff, go ahead.
I was just going to comment and been bearing all that in mind, and it's not unreasonable or anything like that, but stakeholders in things like creative writing, especially in community college, have had a lot of decisions made about them, things removed kind of out of the blue. So what you described, putting all those people in one room, sounds very attractive to people like us. And it may not even be, sounds like it's not even worth doing, I suppose. I don't think we're going to drop trying to get some things done. This whole skills aspect of the core is, it'd be good to hear some public comment about that, about making room maybe in some of these boxes for more courses. But does that make sense? I mean, It is a relatively small number, but they're also very popular courses. They're very popular in four-year colleges. They're growing programs in four-year colleges. You do need a portfolio to transfer in to U of H, I'm sure. I'm not sure where you write that portfolio if you're a poor guy with $500 to spend every semester and you want to take creative writing courses. So.
Okay, Joe, then Jen. Oh, you're done? Okay.
One of my concerns with this literature-based status quo, FOS, is that the courses that aren't in the FOS are not going to be taught at the community college. There'll be no incentive to offer them because the students won't take them because they're not in the course in the FOS. And I just want to double check, is it really true that the majority of you feel that we couldn't consider an English 1301, English 1302, English 2311, FOS in English technical communication?
William and then April.
I just want to reiterate, the classes will absolutely still be taught at the community college level because we're only talking about English majors. And technical writing, for example, is mostly non-majors. It's mostly taken by people outside the English majors, people in engineering, for example. Creative writing is mostly taken as an elective. People who want to write, they're going to take that class anyway. And most of the universities will still accept it as a transfer class. We just won't have outlined a specific pathway for creative writing as a field of study. It doesn't mean that the classes disappear. It just means that we haven't codified. In other words, the status quo that we had already will still exist. I don't think that the field of study takes away technical writing or creative writing. It just says, if you want to be an English major and you want to follow this field of study, here's one path that we know will work.
Okay, April. Yeah, and I would, being also at the community college, would echo that. Mostly business majors. Now, if you have someone, for instance, that's going to tech, and I recommend techs like professional degrees in technical writing all the time to students, then yeah, they probably would prefer maybe to take one of the tech writings if they wanted to, just to kind of introduce them to the area or something. But yeah, since just like you were saying, 30 to 40 sections at A&M of tech writing, that's primarily for non-majors. Those classes, yeah, aren't going to disappear. I do still like the idea of some kind of writing track, to be honest, but that doesn't mean that just because they're not in this particular, granted, heavily leaning towards literature, at least at the sophomore level. We do still have 2 writing classes in there, at least, that, you know, those classes won't stop being taught. There's still quite a few people that enroll in those courses.
Well, and I think that keep in mind, this doesn't give you the full 60 hours that's going for an associate's either. So there's other classes that are going to fill in there too. And those can be those. And you're going to be advising if somebody's going towards a degree at tech or the other few colleges that have a particular thing like that.
One of the
that
things
do that. And even at our university, we start our technical writing at a 3,000 level. But the majority of the people in our courses are not English majors. They're criminal justice, they're kinesiology, they're business, they're everything but are English majors.
One of the things Alan also did say to us when he was bringing up these numbers is we can say that if you have a technical writing degree, creative writing, rhetoric, that this field of study does not have to apply to those degrees. It only has to apply to the English direction. But if you have a separate bachelor's degree in one of those writing areas, this field of study does not have to be accepted.
And the converse is true, that if there's a technical writing program and they want to accept this field of study, then they're perfectly welcome to accept it. They just wouldn't be required to.
I was just going to say that our university is moving toward, I hope, a major in technical and professional communication, possibly a major in creative writing. It's just too soon for us to try to put that into this field of study now. If there could be a field of study on creative writing, if there could be a field of study on technical and professional communication, if there could be one on writing studies, I'd love it. But that would seem to me to be, we'd have to constitute another committee to do that. I'm not sure we would be the best people
Is there some
decide
way
all
that
those
we
questions.
could qualify that if a student was completing this FOS at a junior college and looking at the institution to which he's going to transfer, discovered that he had now 9 hours of survey. He's got 3 in the core curriculum and 6 here, that he could then substitute one of those survey courses for another English course? So instead of coming out with 9 hours of survey, which we're not wanting undergraduate 9-hour surveys, that they could replace it with another English course, which would fit with tech writing or creative writing.
I'm not sure I follow you, Sally. What are you talking?
If a student, you know, I'm in a community college and I'm looking at this FOS and I'm seeing in order to complete the English FOS, I need to take 6 hours of survey. But in my core curriculum, I've already got another 3 hours of survey under my language lit, right, in culture.
One of the 6 already counts.
But it's not going to do for his hours, right? Because we got 42.
Oh, yes.
Well, no, you can't count hours twice. The hours are you going to count 42 here in the core, or they're going to count?
The FOS overlap.
They do overlap.
Oh, okay.
So they'll
Okay.
actually only come
I get
out
it.
with 3
I
hours
gotcha.
that aren't in the
Okay.
core.
Remember that FOS is to fit within not just the major hours, but the whole degree program. So yes, they can count in the core. Yes, they can count in the bachelor's requirements for the Bachelor's of Arts, or yes, they can count in actual
So,
major hours.
I think the action we might want to discuss here is, do we want to include a statement on this field of study that writing programs are not required but may choose to accept this field of study at their discretion? Would that be? Well, it might be actually, yeah, because they might have to be forced to take this more, literature classes into that writing program at like Tech or UT or some of those places, unless we say otherwise.
First, I want to address what Jen's been talking about back there, because I'm a strong supporter of what she said. And she said something in our little gathering over there that if we just go with something similar to what we have, many community colleges might feel that their focus on writing studies is going to be diminished. In other words, and I feel that, although I don't think that business, I don't think industry is going to let that happen. I think there's going to be other demands. But if we're here as an English and we're dealing with English degrees, bachelor degrees, English programs, then I wonder how legal or how forceful would be a statement like what you just said, given what the FOS rules say, because they do specify program. And if we're trying to carve out, well, some of you with programs that have, for instance, we have a writing studies track. I don't know who would be monitoring us, but I could envision, would we be allowed to? Because our track is still stuck in that English box, right? And it's taken us years just to get the track, but the track is purposeful words, which was what you fear, and rightfully so. We were told that is a way for the divorce.
The degree.
You track, and then you get your own department. And that's happened a couple of times at our university. So that's the road we're headed, and I would feel much more of a stronger advocate for what Jen is saying about a separate thing if once we achieve that divorce.
Yeah, I think that I think actually Kevin was kind of mentioning that too, that I think there are all kinds of things in the process of this, but we're really looking at trying to do the FOS for now, for students coming, right? And I do think that if we make that wording, it wouldn't be for those of us, many of us that have all kinds of different tracks. It would be for those of us that have actual programs, those 7 programs that are actual programs. Until you split and actually have your own.
Yes, and then you would have your own choices to make.
Right.
I'm sorry. I've just fought this writing studies thing for so many years now. We are in a weird position, and William was just saying the ACGM is assuming a literature or an English degree that probably doesn't exist very much in a lot of places, right? Upper division English has changed dramatically. We were just talking about all the different courses. So when we start talking about writing, as trying to distinguish writing from English, we have a lot of work to do on the ground. I don't know that we're ready to have that done for us by the Higher Education Coordinating Board or by the legislation. We just have to do a lot of talking to our community college colleagues. What can we do to help your programs support? If you want to come here, do this. I don't know how we do that, but we're struggling with that with Del Mar. I don't know. That was a wander. I'm sorry. Erase that.
Charles, did you still have something you wanted to add?
Obviously, I think we all want to be sensitive to not having an FOS that actually impedes any students. But it was just out of curiosity, I brought up the Tech BA in Technical Communication, and you see that it is just as compatible with that. So it actually requires English 2311 and 2312, and a 2000 level literature course. So we are in the major, so we're doing just as well by that degree as we are, by the University of Houston's English degree. And obviously there may be this is just one program, but it doesn't look like it is producing a catastrophic result for.
Essentially, they would end up with 3 more hours of literature than they needed.
And the University of Houston's in the same boat. We're going to have to address it too.
Well, and I think that's what Gary was trying to get at, is that the number of students that would be affected, what we've done is we've put together an FOS that doesn't affect a lot of students, that doesn't negatively affect students, and that will be able to be transferred in without a problem. And I think that is a big portion of those constraints that we wanted to do, is not to have people negatively affected.
So do we want to add this statement or not?
Leave it alone.
Leave it alone? No?
Okay. So we think that the RET Comp, creative writing programs, and technical writing programs that exist out there would still be subject to this FOS. Yes. Okay. All right. All right. So is there anything else that we need to do to be able to move forward with this FOS before it goes out there to public comment then today? And we'll give it to Alan to take from here.
There is one other little thing on the agenda that I would, because of Public Meeting Acts, we are not supposed to have motions made and votes made on things unless we have a meeting that we've advertised to the public and are broadcasting and allowing people to come in, and the public to come in and testify. Open Meetings Act. So I would appreciate it if somebody were to perhaps make a motion to authorize your co-chairs to do some mop-up business, such as approving the final wording of the minutes, which is usually something the whole committee would vote on, but we can't pull everybody back together or have a conference call, advertise it in the register just to approve the minutes. So if you could authorize the co-chairs to finalize the wording of the final field of study, if you could authorize the co-chairs to approve the minutes, and perhaps any other miscellaneous business that comes before the committee, then of course the co-chairs and I will solicit your opinions via email, and you can always correspond with us, and you'll get a draft of the minutes to send in your recommendations. But in terms of authorizing things, maybe it would make things simpler if you could authorize your co-chairs to do that on your behalf.
Okay, so,
I second.
okay. All right. All those in favor? That's everybody, right?
Thank you.
All right.
And
Thank you so much.
another little bit of business to keep up. I gave you a little sheet to estimate your expenses. We have to keep an estimate of your costs, both in time and money, to come here and participate in this committee. So if you have it, if you want to estimate your time and money for the return trip home, you can go ahead and leave that with me while you're here. Otherwise, please keep a note of your expenses on your return home and any other work that you do to look at the public comments and cast your ballots about that. And be sure to remember to email that back to me. You can PDF it or send it to me as an email, but make sure you don't forget about that. I'll send you a reminder down the road. Yes,
When do you have a
eventually,
deadline that might help?
yeah, send me the expense and timesheet.
Do you want a deadline that might help?
Well, no, because after the 30-day period, we'll get our comments in, and then I'll send those to you, and then it's going to take 2 hours of your time probably to read those public comments, craft your responses to them, and if we make changes to the FOS, then that goes back out for another 30 days for public comment, and then back to you again to approve before it can go to the board. So there's some time that you have left to spend on the committee. If you just want to estimate another 6 hours, you can do so. But if you prefer to wait, then that's okay if you want to get an exact figure. Well, they don't know what to make comments on until we send out the final document. I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear your question. Can you use your mic?
There's a link.
When the public comment site goes up, can you send us that link?
Oh, sure, of course, yeah. And I encourage you, as you're a representative here on the committee, representing your constituent institutions, your peer groups. So we were careful to try to choose institutions where the nominations allowed us to, of different university systems, different community college districts, different parts of the state. So please, when the memo comes out, which I'll forward to you, please make sure it comes to your attention of your department, but also your peer institutions. If you're a UT institution school or a Texas Tech system school, contact your colleagues in those departments and make sure that people see this. Hopefully, in that 30-day period, there'll be a committee meeting for departments at some point around the state, and it's a great item to bring up in a department committee agenda to talk about the field of study and how it would impact, and perhaps the department as a whole would like to make one cohesive reply to the field of study, or individual faculty members are welcome to send in comments as well. So I encourage you to solicit these among your colleagues. That would be a big help to us. And if you're feeling funny about lack of representation here on the committee for technical writing people or community college, creative writing people, then specifically encourage them to offer feedback, and that would be helpful to all of you and to us when we see how this field of study is going down.
All right, if we have no other business, do I have a motion to adjourn? Seconded? All those in favor? All right.
Well, the coordinating board thanks you very much for this. We are very aware of the time, the canceled classes, the expenses that go into your work to come to a meeting like this, and we are very much appreciative not only of your time, but also of your energy and expertise. So thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Alan.